Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Dr. Jennifer Turner. I'm a senior research associate at Institute for Women's Policy Research, and I'd like to welcome you all to our virtual event, Pay Equity and Beyond, Supporting Black Women as Organizational Leaders. I am going to begin with a brief presentation, and then we will get into our panel discussion. I'm going to share my screen with you all. Please let me know if you have trouble seeing it. Okay, all right. So hopefully you all can see my screen. I'm going to start by highlighting some of the recent findings from a fact sheet that IWPR recently released for Black Women's Equal Pay Day, which was July 9th. We know that nationally, all Black women with earnings were paid 66.5 cents for every dollar earned by white men. We also know that pay disparities vary a lot across the states. And we know that Black women earn 41.8 cents per dollar in Utah and 75.3 cents per dollar in Hawaii. So that really shows you the variation in pay disparities across states. Also, we know that Black women earn less than men across education levels. So it doesn't matter how highly educated Black women are, they still earn less than men, and then as well as across age groups. Obviously, systematic racism and sexism are what largely contribute to these pay inequities for Black women. Some policy options that we recommended for helping to close the gap are salary transparency, workplace protections against discrimination and harassment, paid leave, affordable childcare, access to reproductive health services, and student debt cancellation. And you can read more about all of these in our fact sheet, which I have the QR code for here. I didn't go into detail about the policy recommendations to save time. So if you would like more detail on those, please scan this QR code. And hopefully I'll remember to bring this back up at the end so that you all can download the fact sheet. We also need more Black women in leadership roles. And IWPR recently conducted a poll with Morning Consult looking at specifically BIPOC women in leadership, so not just Black women, but Black, Indigenous, and people of color, women who identified under that spectrum. And there is some good news from that poll. So we know that 8 in 10 women of color in leadership are satisfied with their wage or salary and mentorship opportunities. 7 out of 10 women of color in leadership believe that future generations of women of color will have more economic prosperity, and a majority think working women of color in their generation have it easier than other generations. Some of the challenges, though, are that 3 out of 5 women of color in leadership feel pressure to maintain appearances, fit in socially, look physically fit, and be perceived as non-emotional to maintain their current level of success. We also know that 2/5 of women of color in leadership report burnout, a quarter report race discrimination, and 1/5 report gender discrimination has negatively affected them in the workplace. Also, 4 out of 5 women of color in leadership agree that their company is making more efforts in combating discrimination towards race and gender in the workplace than in the past. But 9 out of 10 agree that there are systemic issues of bias and discrimination holding women back in the workforce. So these results show us that we have made some strides, but we still do have some progress to be made. And so on that note, we are going to now transition to our panel portion of the event. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I will introduce Dr. Jamila Taylor, who's our president and CEO at IWPR. She will be moderating our panel. And I'll go ahead and read her bio for you all. Dr. Jamila K. Taylor is a national health equity leader, seasoned health policy researcher, and social justice advocate. and president and CEO of the Institute for Women's Policy Research. Throughout her 20-plus year career, Taylor has championed the health and rights of women of both in the US and around the world, promoting policies that ensure access to vital health care, including both support for abortion access, ensuring safe and compassionate reproductive and maternal health care, and dismantling structural racism within the US healthcare system. She has held leadership positions in national organizations such as the Center for American Progress, the Century Foundation, the National WIC Association, and others. She started her career as a congressional staffer in the office of Representative Robert C. or Bobby Scott in the late 1990s. Dr. Taylor is a highly sought after expert by national and international press, as well as by US government officials, academics, advocates, foundations, and other key stakeholders. She has testified before Congress and published and presented extensively on various public policy issues. Her work has been seen in The Hill, Real Clear Policy, Real Clear Health, The Nation, US News and World Report, Yale Journal of International Affairs, Georgetown Journal of International Affairs, Scientific American, Journal of Law, Medicine and Ethics, as well as a host of other publications. She has also provided commentary on the most pressing women's issues of our generation on NPR, Morning Consult, Women at Work, powered by the Wharton School, C-SPAN, Fox News, Black News Channel, BBC World News, Politico Live, and other media programs. Dr. Taylor holds a PhD in political science from Howard University, a master's degree in public administration from Virginia Commonwealth University, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from Hampton University. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jamila K. Taylor. Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for the introduction. I also want to take a moment to thank the awesome IWPR research staff for their ongoing work to shed light on this issue around pay equity, especially as it pertains to women of color. I also want to thank the team for the recent polling work on Black women's leaders and the ongoing challenges they face in the workplace. IWPR is committed to being a key voice on these issues and a resource moving forward. I also want to start off by thanking our esteemed panelists for this conversation today. I have been so excited about this conversation and this event, and I couldn't be in better company. So I'm going to start off with introducing our speakers, and then we'll get into the conversation. First, we have Dr. Robin Watson Ellerby. Robin is the Chief Strategy Officer at IWPR, where she leverages over 20 years of leadership and research experience to drive strategic initiatives aimed at achieving organizational goals and advancing IWPR's mission. She is a seasoned scientist, and her research focuses on addressing disparities affecting minority communities. She is adept at recruiting minority participants for health promotion and disease prevention research, as well as workforce programs aimed at increasing minority representation in STEM and public health fields. Next, we have Gloria L. Blackwell, who is the CEO of the American Association of University Women. She's renowned for her 15-year tenure overseeing the organization's prestigious fellowships and grants programs, dispersing over $70 million to scholars and programs worldwide. She has notably enhanced AAUW's outreach efforts to women and girls of color, making significant contributions to equity and education initiatives. Last but not least, we have Dr. Valerie R. Wilson, who is a prominent labor economist and serves as a director of Economic Policy Institute's program on race, ethnicity, and the economy, PRE. In this role, she leads PRE as a leading authority on economic status of American communities of color. She also provides expert reports and policy analyses. Wilson is dedicated to advancing EPI's leadership and advocating for racial and economic justice while expanding PRE's influence in shaping policy solutions that prioritize racial equity. Thank you all again for being here. So Jennifer presented statistics highlighting the ongoing disparity that Black women face, particularly when it comes to pay issues. And we know that these disparities are a factor even for high-earning Black women and Black women in leadership roles. IWPR's own polls show the rampant discrimination, social pressures, and burnout that continue to be problems for Black women leaders, as do other women working in similar fields as IWPR and a whole host of fields out there. I personally have also dealt with a lot of these challenges a time or two. And I think the one thing that has kept me grounded as I've moved on in my career is having a strong network of other Black women around me, whether it's on my leadership team, in my close friend network, or even in the professional network in these communities. And I think it's really important and essential to have a network of supporters, both within the workplace and in the personal sphere. So I want to start off with a little bit of bright light when it comes to this conversation around these issues. We're going to talk about the challenges today, but we're also going to talk about the positive aspects of being Black women in leadership and what we need to continue to be positive, remain focused, and successful in our career journeys. So my first question to the panel today is, as you reflect on key moments in your career path, what are some of the supports and resources that have made a difference for you, whether it's individuals in your lives or even from organizations that may have contributed to your career growth? Why don't we start with Valerie?
Thank you so much, Jamila, and it's a pleasure to be a part of this conversation today. I really like this question, and I think, you've already alluded to it. I think people have played such a critical role in supporting me and helping me to develop in my career. That starts from just my first experience with the field of economics, which is a field that you don't see a lot of Black women in. Although the first Black PhD in economics was a Black woman. I didn't even know that until I was well into my career. But it's been throughout time when people would see me and recognize that I had a talent for one thing or another and recommend that I go try this program or go apply for this job. So people have been essential. Just last year, as a matter of fact, I lost a very dear friend and mentor, Dr. Bill Spriggs, who I tell everyone, he is probably 90% responsible for me even being in the profession still today. Grad school can be grueling. He gave me my first job in DC when I was taking a break from grad school, and really was essential in telling me, you can go back, you need to finish, we need you in this profession. So it's been people. You talked about networks. I think about organizations that I've been a part of, the National Economic Association, which is the professional association of Black economists, continues to be a community that has been supportive throughout my career. And then I've also been really fortunate in terms of the organizations that I've worked for to have very supportive leadership in those organizations that want to continue to see me grow, again, are willing to give me opportunities for growth and expansion. And so it really has come down to the people that I've been fortunate enough to have in my path.
Great. Thank you so much, Valerie. And I also want to just take a moment and, hold space for Bill Spriggs and bring him into the conversation. He is someone that I did not get to meet or work with personally, but would send me messages on Twitter to, acknowledge the great work that I've been doing in my career. He was just such a bright light in this field. And so thank you for bringing that into the conversation. And what a blessing that he was able to support you and you were able to work with him. Why don't we go to Gloria next?
Jamila. Hi, I also am happy to be here with all of you having this important conversation today. And I really echo what Valerie said, as someone who's been in the nonprofit and higher ed and global development space for decades, it's really been about exposure to an incredible array of women and having the opportunity to connect with them, to see their professional growth, to have them cheering me on, to hear their stories and see how they have persevered. That's really what's given me life. And also just really having supportive leaders who actually believed in me, who I could learn from their leadership style. I could see that they were committed to my professional growth. And that really gave me the opportunity to develop a great deal of strength, even when I really may not have been feeling confident at times. I knew that there were people who had my back, and that really is what continues to support me. And I think also having the opportunity, to see women, to see Black and brown women, to see women who look like me. It's one thing when you're kind of, in the same space and you're supporting each other, but some of it sometimes from a distance, right? People you don't really know, but you may be fangirling over them, right? But it really, I think, changes a bit when you step up in leadership positions and you're not seeing them from a distance, right? We're in the trenches together now. So, being in the trenches together, being open to feedback, getting those pointers that we need, and really also sometimes getting the loving criticism that we need, I think is really, really important. And, I echo just being a part of really supportive organizations as well. It really does make all the difference. And having those organizations support professional growth, really having those organizations dedicated and committed to training. That's really been important and a part of professional associations that really help you to step up to the next level.
Thank you so much, Gloria. And I agree, we're in the trenches together. And, I think another key point here to sort of rise up is the fact that we're seeing so many more Black women in leadership roles. We have our first ever, Black Vice President of the United States, a Black woman who has been so essential to seeing really key policy issues over the finish line over the last 4 years. And there's also conversation about her role and trajectory in this country as a national leader. We're also seeing more Black women lead Fortune 500 companies. And so it's really an important moment, I think, for Black women's leadership, all over the country. And so, Robin, I want to bring you in here to see, if you have anything to add to this question.
Thank you, Jamila. I want to first say, I too am so excited about this conversation, not only because I'm excited to be in conversation with you, Jamila and Gloria and Valerie, because I've worked with you guys in different situations, but I also want to say to those who don't know me personally, I'm so excited that I have been dealing with laryngitis, but I was certain that I was going to be here and make it because I think that this is a conversation that needs to happen. As Jamila said, we're seeing more Black women in leadership. And so I think that it's important that we're having these conversations of, what are the lived experiences of Black women in leadership? How can we be supported? What are our challenges? What are some of the barriers? And how do we make sure that we keep seeing increase for Black women in these positions? So I just wanted to say, before I get to the question, just that I'm thankful also for working for an organization that can see the importance of this. And so thank you to you, Jennifer, and to you, Jamila, for us all working together to put this platform out here. To the question at hand, support, it's very similar to what, Gloria and Valerie said about it's the people. I think of similar to Valerie, I had a story where I thought about my first job out of college. I was working out of undergrad. I was working for the Alameda County Employees Retirement Association, and I was an assistant to the chief financial officer. And it was a Black female. Her name was Catherine Walker, and I want to say it, even though she's probably not on this call, because I believe in giving people their flowers. And I didn't realize what a benefit it would be to see and work with this Black female leader, particularly at 23. I didn't realize how implemental that would be to my career. Because while I was able to learn, technical skills like finances and budgets and correspondence and, speaking and interacting with different audiences and things of that nature, what I found to be equally as important was to see the possibility of, to see a Black woman in leadership made me realize that, okay, this is a possibility for me. I can lead an organization. I can be a part of their senior leadership team. And so that was great for as far as career advancement, but it also helped me to see her navigate this space to, manage staff, interact with a board of directors and members, and just to understand the complexities of leadership. And so I don't think I realized it at the time, because you're 23, what an impact that would have. And then, I also have to say to witness the work that she did on not only how she got there, but what she had to do to stay there. And the struggles she even experienced with advancing her career. So it helped me understand in an early age some of the challenges Black women face in the workspace. And so I found that experience to be just holistically a learning and a supportive experience. So those were the resources starting off, and then continuing, like Gloria said, to be surrounded by Black women in this space, who are, fighting the good fight when it comes to gender equity, but also those who might not be in the same work, who are just willing to be either friends and or colleagues, and just sisters in this fight. So I would say that's the resources support.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin. So I want to talk a little bit about challenges. Obviously this conversation is rooted in pay equity, and then we also shared our polling results, but also just want to take a step back and think about the biggest challenges that you may have experienced, and then how you navigated through that. In my thinking about this question, there have been so many challenges, I couldn't pick one to focus on. But again, one thing that I do want to lift up is the fact that, as Black women, I think we pour so much, and I can say this in a general sense because I haven't seen anything different, right? We pour so much into other people, our staff, our families, and oftentimes that's at the detriment of, pouring into ourselves and making sure that we have what we need. And I can say for myself, that is a challenge for me. I work a lot. We've even had some of these conversations internally, and, my staff has been really great, to be honest, about setting up boundaries when it comes to, emailing late in the evening. Also recognizing that sometimes as an executive, that's the only time you have to sort of like take a step back and respond to emails or, get busy work done. But I have been open and receptive to that feedback and have made some adjustments. And so, even something as, like having different work styles, than your team, and being responsive to the need to set up boundaries and respect boundaries of your staff. I think is something that I have been, sort of working through at this stage in my career. But again, there have been so many challenges along the way. And it has been important to have that network around you to help guide you through those moments. What are some of the biggest challenges that you all have had, and how have you navigated that? Why don't we start with Gloria this time around?
Well, there certainly have been challenges. I think early on, I had one of my first supervisors was also, was a Black woman. And, for me, that really sort of laid the groundwork for sort of who I wanted to be, and seeing how, they were able to be elevated and serve as a role model, which was really great. But moving throughout my career, I think one of the main challenges was the fact that, I always felt as though I had to work twice as hard. I really, that I always had to have more credentials, right? And that it's ironic saying this because we're on camera now, but that sense of sort of always being on camera, always being judged, always feeling as though, people were evaluating every single aspect of my life and my, and my being. And I think that that really was a challenge throughout, the microaggressions, the assumptions, the really trying to make sure that you weren't, enforcing any stereotypes that they may have had about Black and brown women. And, really the way that I feel like I overcame them is really just about, stepping up and literally getting rid of that fear of being judged, or sort of lingering on some of the false judgment, that often takes place around Black women. And really just not caring about the judgment, false judgment, particularly of individuals for whom I had zero respect, right? So it's one thing if you are actually someone with credibility. It's a totally different thing if you're not. And I overcame it really just by making sure that I continue to embrace my values, to embrace my own accomplishments, embrace my own strengths, and really having a supportive network, whether it was my colleagues, my family, and friends, because it is a challenge, not only because you're a Black woman, you're a leader or stepping up to be a leader, but also, I must admit, a challenge of being a working mother of 3 children is also a challenge. Full-time, traveling, and having a supportive community really helped to overcome so many of those challenges. And I'm grateful for that.
Thank you so much, Gloria. I'll add to, since you mentioned being a working mom, I remember when my son was an infant, he's 19 now in college, but I was working on the Hill at the time, breastfeeding and dealing with a grueling, congressional schedule and meeting the demands of, supporting a congressional leader. And it was probably one of the toughest moments in my career. And it was interesting because there were supports on site, like we had rooms available to pump if we needed them. At the same time, I didn't always have the support, from my supervisor, if I did need to pump or, I remember sitting behind the member during a hearing and I knew that I really needed to pump but I couldn't leave. And so anyone who has breastfed before probably knows what happened next, right? So I started leaking during the hearing, was so embarrassed, and eventually was able to excuse myself. But, it was a really tough moment. And I think it was then that I was like, you know what, it's probably, as much as I love this job and the excitement of working on the Hill, it's probably time for me to do something else because, the environment just was not friendly at that time. Being a young mom with an infant child and trying to navigate that. And I think, women deal with those pressures and challenges, of being a working parent as well, which also I don't think comes up in the conversation enough. Right now, nationally, we're dealing with so many issues, whether it's a lack of access to childcare for many women in this country. Pay equity is also a piece of it too, access to reliable healthcare. So the list goes on, and why workplace supports for working moms is so essential. So why don't we go with Valerie to see, Valerie, if you have a challenge that you want to share with us and how you overcame that.
Well, I first just want to say amen to what you two have already put on the table in terms of challenges. I relate to all of those things. And I want to take it a step further with some of the things that Gloria was talking about in terms of the perceptions or misperceptions that others may have. For me, one of the biggest challenges with regards to that was internalizing those things and like developing that self-doubt that you're starting to incorrectly see yourself through what you at least think. It's not even always stated, what you think are others' perceptions of you, and then the unrealistic expectations and stress that places on you to be perfect or to be acceptable or to be approved by people who you may or may not need approval from. I think one of the things that was helpful for me in terms of overcoming that was getting to a place where it became clear to me as I moved through my career that there were people behind me looking to me. And at that point, really being very honest and transparent with them about the things that I struggled with. And I think that by opening up in that kind of environment, like we're doing here, it empowers other people, but at the same time, it empowers you. That like, I don't have to try to like keep this secret and pretend that I have it all together and have always had all the right answers, although I have gotten very adept at putting on that mask and that I've got it all figured out. I know how to do this kind of thing. Letting people see that you're a real person, really acknowledging and recognizing what's real and what isn't real, what is an expectation, a realistic expectation, and what isn't, and learning to really separate those things. I think the other piece of that with regards to being a working mom, I too have 3 sons. And so getting to a point where, you really have to realize, we always hear this idea that, you can have it all. You can have the relationship, you can have the kids, you can have the career, you can have the fabulous life and go on vacations, do all these other things you want to do, but you really do have to make trade-offs. So getting to the point where you accept, I'm not going to do it all. It's not all going to be perfect. What's not happening today? And so, just really giving myself more grace, I think, is one way that has helped me to overcome a lot of those challenges.
Thank you so much. So I'm actually going to go to the next question and get Robin in here. And so wanted to take things back a bit and talk about the IWPR Morning Consult poll, which, Jennifer shared in her overview earlier in the program. And respondents of that poll reported feeling pressure to maintain appearances, fit in socially, look physically fit, be perceived as non-emotional, whatever that means, to maintain their current level of success. So just wanted to ask you, Robin, is this something that you have seen mirrored throughout your career? And also, have you dealt with it yourself?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jamila. I keep wanting to say Dr. Jamila as if I don't see you every day. I'm going to answer that question. I hope you don't mind kind of tying the two together, because I think I've seen these incidents, particularly for me, what resonates is the non-emotional part. And I'm going to answer that one, but I want to tie it to the last one. You said challenges, because I think part of the reason why I've seen incidents where either myself or colleagues have had to appear non-emotional is because one of the challenges I've faced is being the only Black woman in the room, and sometimes the only Black person. And so, and that can be either in an employment situation or on a board, advisory board, things of that nature. And so when you are the only Black woman, or sometimes the only Black person, then that can leave you feeling isolated. That can leave you feeling not supported. Then, and at that time, it makes you less able to be emotional, less able to, you have to then show up in a certain way because you are the only one. You also, to Valerie's point, there is the pressure that you then can internalize because you feel like you represent not only all Black women, but the whole Black community. You know what I mean? Your voice at this table, and in this organization is the voice of all Black people. And so that in itself can then carry and bring more weight on having to present a certain way, having to be non-emotional and so forth, and things of that incident. And so, I think about particularly an incident, I was kind of cautious and trying to figure out how do I share this, because I think it's important for the audience, particularly if we have young women, where I was at an organization and there was an incident where it was another leadership person, it was a white male, who had called me out in a meeting, like, literally. And I didn't respond, but I went to speak with him in private. And in this private conversation that we were behind closed doors, he was raising his voice and he was cursing. Oh, yes. And so I was like, so then I started raising my voice, and we were standing up and we were interacting in a way that I had never interacted at work. And the interesting part was why I say this, share this story about the whole non-emotional, because it's the first time I felt that I had gotten emotional. It was definitely not his first time. He was known for it. But at the offset of that, he felt that we were now more connected. He felt that this bonded us as colleagues. And I remember feeling worried that now I was going to be living up to the stereotype as an angry Black female, that how would others perceive me? What was the CEO gonna think? And I don't know this to be true, but some in my gut feel like had this not be a positive experience for him, and perhaps had he not vouched for me, that I would have been seen as an angry Black female. And that my employment could have been at risk. And so I would say that was my own experience, but I've seen others, and I'm sure my panel, the other panels have as well. And I think that also stems from the challenge of being sometimes the only one at the table.
Yeah, have others on the panel experienced that too, being the only, and how did you feel in those moments? I've definitely experienced it as well, and it can definitely feel lonely and isolating. At the same time, as Robin mentioned, having that pressure on you as well to, debunk stereotypes about Black women, and definitely the angry Black woman trope, I feel like follows us everywhere and um, is really hard to get rid of. Not only I think in terms of the internalization that we experience because of that trope, I think is a part of it too. But then also, the perceptions of other, non-Black folks, having that view. Have others dealt with being the only, and how did you maneuver it?
Yeah, I have absolutely been the only at multiple points throughout my life. I think at some point, I mean, sad to say, you get used to it, in the sense that you're aware and you kind of, like have your guard up, you're kind of observing and testing the room and seeing what's going on there. But at the same time, in those instances, if there's ever been an opportunity for me to enlarge the table and to bring more people in, that's how I have chosen to take advantage of that situation. If there's an opportunity, like I said, to expand the group of people who are at the table or in the room, I'm going to bring somebody else in that doesn't look like everybody else around the table. And so again, that's one way of taking that position that can feel very, very isolating, very intimidating, and turning it into something empowering, not just for me, but for others as well.
Right. Gloria, did you have anything to add to this one?
I definitely agree. Certainly sort of drawing a line, the challenge being, kind of putting yourself in kind of a bit of a box, right? So that you won't be judged or misjudged because, you express yourself passionately. It could be perceived as anger. If you have some legitimate frustration, that's also anger. If you're just exasperated about something, right? That's just anger. And, that sort of stricter microscope that we are, under, certainly, whether it can be very stressful. And, we can add to the list, things like even if you have one or two other Black colleagues, right, being mistaken for each other, right? All of those things, sort of add up. And I think that being the only one or just one of a few really puts that pressure to really not not be that person who is fulfilling so many of the really negative stereotypes, right, that they have, and being judged, and really stepping up and ensuring that you really are being, that person who is qualified, that you are demonstrating that you're here because you deserve to be here. And I think that making sure that, those who are looking up to you as an example really do have someone that they understand is sort of not just letting these things go by without really talking about them or having an impact. Yeah, I think that's really important. As Valerie said, if you have an opportunity to really create an opening or create space for other folks, taking the opportunity to do that. And that really can help break down so many of those, unfortunate tropes that continue to exist in our workplace.
Absolutely. And, I also want to say too, reflecting on that non-emotional feeling and, that Black women have, or, we have to subscribe to this non-emotional, we are not robots, even as leaders, we have emotions, we are humans. And I do feel like, you know, um, other people we work with that may not be Black women, they have the privilege of being seen as human, and oftentimes we do not in the workplace, no matter what position we hold. So just wanted to also put that out there, that we are humans and deserve to lean into those emotions if it's appropriate. And yeah, I thought it was important to say that, because I was sort of seeing a theme, definitely from everything that you all were saying. And I've definitely been there too, being treated as a robot, and that I wasn't allowed to lean into a feeling or emotion in the workplace. So next, I want to go and talk a little bit about, systemic racism and sexism in the workplace. What are some of the glaring instances of these issues, whether it's systemic bias, discrimination, sexism, that you have seen in the workplace, and how can organizations alleviate these things? And I think another key aspect of this too is that we've sort of seen, particularly since the killing of George Floyd, you've seen more organizations hire DEI staff, particularly at the C-suite level. Foundations came out with these big statements about how they're going to be doing their grant making differently, with a focus on systemic racism. Even in the Biden administration, early on, we saw, agencies come out and talk about a focus on thinking about systemic racism as we do our policy making in this country. At the same time, some of these efforts can seem performative or a bit of a Band-Aid approach, instead of really getting into the root causes of these issues. So why don't we start with Valerie to talk a little bit about, this topic and what you've seen, and then what organizations can do to really address the issue in a clear and intentional way.
Yeah, I think just to start, a prime example of systemic discrimination, I would point to many of the statistics that Jennifer shared at the start of the webinar. I think one of the clearest ways that we see it is that when we control for those characteristics or those experiences, those background characteristics that we expect, or everybody kind of assumes has some influence on your level of employment, meaning your position and your pay. And we still see statistically significant differences along the lines of race and gender, which in and of themselves have absolutely no correlation with your productivity. For me, that's the clearest example that there is discrimination in the workplace. How else do we describe those consistently significant gaps in pay and in occupation? And so I think the first part of it is really being honest about the fact that those are real things. Unfortunately, in our country, there's still those who will debate or question the realities of racism and sexism. So I think, first of all, it's just really acknowledging that these are real experiences that bear out not only in our data, but also in people's lived experiences and their stories about what they've experienced in the workplace. I think some of the other things that we've been talking about today in terms of Black women leaders and the extreme scrutiny that gets placed on you once you've been elevated to a position. I think this gets to some of the performative. Oh, look, we hired a Black woman for this job, but we're not going to trust her as a professional. We're not going to trust her experience and expertise or her leadership. We still have to kind of like provide some oversight and make sure that, you know, she knows what she's doing and she's doing this like we've always done it in this organization. And so I think both of those things are also systemic issues that may not be as directly measurable as something like pay, but is something that people experience. So then how do we get past those things? I think we have to acknowledge that there's never like a one-step single answer solution. It really has to be a commitment, not only to take that first step to diversify your organization, to make sure people feel included, to make sure that you're implementing pay equity, but to continually evaluate and revisit it, and that it has to be a commitment. It has to be not only a change in your policy, there has to be a change in organizational culture often to overcome those things. And so we have to be able to measure the things that we want to change, and we have to be willing to look at them and evaluate them consistently to see that we are actually expanding and making progress, because nobody wants to be the token, the person that's just put there for a body or a face and not being valued for what they really bring in terms of their experience, their skills, and their knowledge.
Thank you. I do want to acknowledge the head nodding, Valerie, that we all seem to do in unison when you talked about, you know, putting Black women into these roles and then not trusting them to lean into their leadership in authentic ways and to support them, you know, almost like micromanaging, you know, their roles. And so I have definitely experienced that, and I want to thank you for calling it out. But we all definitely connected there on that one with the head nods. So Gloria, I wanted to see if you had anything, you know, to add on this.
Thank you, Jamila. Yes, I was nodding my head, but I think it was just a normal reaction of agreement. But I think, Valerie, I mean, you hit the nail on the head when we hear that word intersectional so much these days, right? Intersectional has now just become something that, you know, people toss around like, you know, popcorn in a movie theater, right? Because it can be incredibly performative. But Black women really do navigate that tough intersection of race and gender. And we really do face unique stereotypes and biases, and the research is there. So it can't be denied. And I think that, you know, part of it is that there is sort of that ongoing denial that it actually exists. And we certainly know that it does. And, you know, we are earning degrees at higher rates, right? But we are impacted by occupational segregation, right? Compounded by that significant pay gap, which we know is rooted in historical inequities. And of course, that translates also into higher student loan debt, right? The list can go on. And so it plays out in our workplaces with hiring practices, promotional practices, as well as, of course, and we see it all the time, unequal access to opportunities. And so those specific things that continue to plague us are really things that, you know, the research keeps certainly letting us know that it hasn't gone away, whether it's our names, right, and how we are discriminated against for what are deemed as certain Black names or presumed to be Black names we're getting fewer opportunities to be interviewed, right? That's something that's been around for a long time, even though our credentials may be, not just the same, but higher than white applicants. Every time I hear that another state or someone has put something in place around the Crown Act, it makes me think about discrimination about our hair, right? And having hair that's not straight, and having kinky, curly, or coily hair, the way that our hair comes out of our head naturally, right? That's discrimination that continues to happen, right? In 2024, and it's something that we continue to see as being deemed unprofessional. I can remember when I cut my own hair, and I remember thinking, great, now I can finally have people stop commenting on my hair all the time. And well, that didn't really happen, but it's just an ongoing thing. The whole unprofessional piece, right? And also, just being told time and time again, right, when people are not hired, that that we're not a good culture fit for the organization. It really is perpetuating, this desire for racial homogeneity, right? Which shouldn't be a thing. And so, all of those things really are adding to the fact that Black women continue, to be discriminated against in the workplace. And, whether it's being underrepresented in senior leadership positions and so many other things. But I think organizations, as Valerie, as you noted, really need to step up, right? They can alleviate racism and sexism in the workplace. And it really does need to start by ensuring that leaders are diverse, equal opportunities, and of course, fair pay. But I think one of the key ways that first needs to happen is that they really need to acknowledge that change needs to happen. I think so many organizations still aren't acknowledging it, and really acknowledging that, these causes of inequities, they're not simple, right? They're complex, they're interrelated, and that the strategies needed for reducing them are really about fixing and addressing multiple problems on multiple levels. And, organizations that have established their values need to live them, they need to stand up for them, and they really do need to sort of put that equity and inclusion lens on their hiring and their promotional practices, on their compensation practices, and really implement some training, to really make sure that they are encouraging an inclusive culture. I think that's really being proactive, and that's really the only way that systemic bias and discrimination is actually ever going to be addressed. And that organizations also really need to advocate for policies, that are going to empower workers and that can really mitigate the impact of gender and racial discrimination. That's whether it's the Paycheck Fairness Act or all of the other things that we have been advocating for, on the Hill and in states for quite a long time.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Actually, that's a good segue into a conversation about the election. We know that, we're talking about Black women in leadership. Black women also have such great power, when it comes to elections, particularly in this country. We're such a powerful voting bloc to the point that we actually decide elections. So just wanted to ask you all, we know that November is going to be a pivotal time in this country. And there are so many things about this election that are really centered around women and that hinge on our productivity, our livelihood in this country. Things like, reproductive rights, childcare access, healthcare, economic justice issues. I mean, the list really goes on and on. What are you all most focused on or even worried about, when it comes to the upcoming election as it pertains to women. I will tell you all that for me, as someone who has worked on reproductive justice for, decades, I'm really nervous about reproductive rights. We've had the Dobbs decision. The decision is with the states, how they choose to deal with abortion rights. But we know that abortion is largely inaccessible at this point. IWPR's own research has shown that abortion restrictions and bans cost the US economy $68 billion. And, this is an issue that not only impacts a woman's ability to be part of the workforce and earn livable, thriving wages, take care of her family. Not having access to reproductive health care can also be deadly. We are also a country that has a burgeoning maternal health crisis, where Black women are 3 times more likely to die than their white counterparts. And not having access to abortion is closely linked to issues around maternal mortality. So why don't we start with Robin to share, what you're most worried about when it comes to this upcoming election?
Yeah, thank you, Jamila. It's interesting. You kind of started out with what I'm most worried about, not the reproductive rights, which I am worried. But you spoke about Black women's voices. You spoke about the impact that we've had in elections. And in 2020, the 2020 presidential election had the highest voter turnout in the 21st century. And I believe that the stat was 63% of eligible Black voters showed up, with the majority being Black women. And my biggest fear is that, based on polls and my personal conversations, is that, Black women aren't feeling that neither political party is going to serve their needs. And with that, they may not show up at the polls. And if we don't show up at the polls, the very things that you were speaking about that disproportionately impact Black women, whether it's, higher unemployment, lower wages, reproductive rights, childcare, all these things that disproportionately impact Black women, will only worsen if we don't show up and show out and have our voices heard, not just but also just not at the presidential level, but at the state level. And so that is a fear, because that's the kind of things that are ruminating, that these issues will just get worse. And so that, for me, that's the biggest thing, is I know what the impact that we have had. It goes back to the things that we say about Black women kind of carrying the community and so forth, and we do show up in droves. But we also are the ones who are thinking about those different aspects. We're thinking about the family, we're thinking about economics, we're thinking about reproductive rights, we're thinking about education. All of these issues are on the ballot. And so if we don't show up, then what? So that's the thing that unfortunately keeps me kind of up at night, and so forth.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robin. Gloria or Valerie, do you all have thoughts on this? Go ahead, Gloria.
Sure. Certainly echoing what you have already said. I think because, part of it is that, clearly AEW is an organization with a long history of nonpartisan voter engagement work. But when I think about the issue of, the ongoing challenges to voting rights, and the fact that there seems to be a level of voter apathy that's taking place, and how that negative impact can certainly take place. I mean, civic engagement is key. We know that we can have an impact. We know that we need to get people out and voting. So, we're focusing on voter registration. We're focusing not just on registration, but also on education, because, my fear also is that people are being given ongoing misinformation, right? That, facts are no longer seem to be a thing these days, and that we want to be able to provide resources so that people really do understand what's at stake. And I think so many people just don't understand what's at stake. They need to understand the issues that are key to gender equity. They need to understand the issues that are key to women's economic security, women's health care. And getting that education piece out, I think it's really important, because, as you mentioned, when we vote, we do make a difference. But if there's a challenge, that we're not even going to go out and vote, then that apathy really, it really is a fear. So whether it's healthcare, reproductive rights, pay equity, workplace protections, right? All of these things need to be at the forefront. And can we be reassured that when we do vote, that these things are going to be up at the top of the agenda? And so we really need to make sure that our voices are being heard, because there's so much at stake. And I think that all of us are still reeling from the past 2 years. And that certainly keeps me up at night. And I don't want to imagine any additional rollbacks or setbacks in the progress that we've been trying to make. So just encourage everyone to, get out and vote and educate themselves about the issues that are key to achieving gender equity, and supporting everyone who needs to have a secure economic future in our country.
Absolutely. One point, and then I definitely want to get Valerie in here too, but, just also thinking about, I think there is an agenda to chip away at basic freedoms in this country, and they are particularly front and center in this election. And obviously, we're not just talking about women or people of color. We're also talking about, a target being on immigrants in this country, LGBTQ plus people, people with disabilities. And so I think the very essence of, freedom and liberation is also on the line in ways that I don't think I have seen it in my generation with this election. And so it's really going to be important for people to get out and vote, and make their voices heard in November. So Valerie, anything you have to add? What are you worried about?
Just building on that last point that you made, I think what's especially frustrating and concerning is that these things that are clearly attacks on freedom are themselves being like messaged and positioned as somehow expanding freedom in some way. And so, we think about like the messages that are out there that people are consuming, how intentionally misleading and disingenuous those things are. But I think that speaks to why we have historically seen such high voter turnout and participation among Black women, because of that very issue of intersectionality, how we touch so many different issues related to gender, equity and healthcare, issues on the economic front as people more likely to be in the working class, issues related to race, issues related to basic civil rights, issues related to education as caregivers and leaders in the community. So I think it's important that at the same time that we acknowledge these concerns and in what very troubling times that we're in, that historically Black women have been an essential voting bloc because we are so close to so many of those issues. And really for us, there is a lot at stake because we touch almost any issue that could show up in a political platform. So I too would encourage everyone, you cannot stay home. All right, there is a choice to make. You're making a choice by not going. And so we all need to do our civic duty and be a part of this election.
Thank you all so much. So I do want to pass things back over to Jennifer right now to help us moderate audience Q&A. Jennifer?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for such a great conversation. So I think this first question is a really good direction to kind of take the conversation. Several of you all mentioned support that you've gotten throughout your career. And so this question is about what are the ways that Black women can support each other in the workplace when we come up against challenges of being seen as angry? And it's kind of a two-part question because the second part of it is, what ways do you all try to mentor other Black women in the workplace? It also says without being like super hypercritical or holding them to extremely high standards. But I think the key piece there is mentoring. So the first part is about support. What are ways that Black women can support each other? And then what are some ways that you all try to mentor Black women? So I guess anyone can respond. Unless Jamila,
Yeah,
if you
I
had
can-
an idea.
Yeah, I can start off, and obviously I know the other panelists have a response to this too. For me, I think supporting other Black women is, first off, offering a listening ear. I mean, I'll use an example even for me and Robin. I feel like, folks can definitely walk by either of our offices at any point in the day and hear us laughing together, like belly laughs. But we're also talking about work and business and what we need to do as leaders of the organization. But I think even just creating community and friendships with Black women, in the workplace is really important. And I think also too on the mentorship side, being available. I know for me, even though I'm the CEO of IWPR, I have an open door policy with everyone in the organization, and we have a wonderful group of brilliant Black women on staff here, and anyone can schedule a meeting with me, whether they want to talk through a work idea or a project, ideas for the organization in terms of our internal policies, or if they just want to talk about a great book that they're reading, that they want to encourage me to read too, or a television show that they're watching right now. So really having that open door policy and offering that mentorship. I think also too, being clear about that relationship, because I've also been in situations where, I love being a mentor and have offered that to people, and it may feel odd, in the workplace for some people to have that kind of mentorship, or even to open yourself up to that kind of vulnerability, especially if it's a supervisor or someone of authority in an organization. But I think just being clear that you're open to that and holding space to honor it, I think is really important. And I think another piece too is being a connector, right? I mean, we're a group of Black women in one organization, or even in this meeting. There's so many other Black women that are a part of our networks that also need support, or also willing to offer support. And I think, especially in a town like Washington, having those connections is so important. And I think that's also a piece of that support that is essential if you are trying to build a career in this town.
Did anyone else want to add anything to that?
I'll add the piece around, or build on the piece around the personal connections. I think that, and I love hearing, about the laughter as people walk past your office. I really do, and it can be very tough these days because of, if you have a hybrid workplace, right? So everyone's not in on the same day, and you have to be really intentional about making those connections. But I think for me, one of the things that I certainly do on a regular basis is look for those personal connections, and really show interest in people, not just in the job that you're doing, but whether it's just a question, it could be a question about your weekend. It could be a question about those shoes you're wearing, or leaving myself also open to questions. And some of the conversations, when I think about them now, I mean, it really gives people also a sense that, we are human beings, we have our ups and downs, and we also like to have fun. And those personal connections, the value in them is, you certainly can't put a price on it. And the piece around, emotions and anger and being misinterpreted, I must say that one of the things that I have had multiple conversations with over the years with Black women who've also been challenged with that, I would say to them, part of it is the fact that, often people are doing these things in order to actually trigger you. And even if it's outside of how you would normally act anyway, it's really being done deliberately. So you really have to step back and very often, sometimes just breathe. I tell people, just breathe. Remember who you are, and don't fall into the trap. And really afterwards, depending on how you're feeling, just make sure that you seek out someone, who can help to validate that it really wasn't about you or some negativity that you have, because that's really not the truth.
Okay, I just wanted to give Robin and Valerie a chance to respond before I go to the next question.
I can add something, but I also want to be mindful of time and make sure that people are getting their questions answered. The only thing, so that I'll add something really quickly, and I appreciate that Jamila mentioned our laughter, because that does make work better. It makes it easier to be surrounded and supported by another Black woman leader, and who likes to laugh at the same things you do. But I would say, to that point, very similar to this talk that we're doing, and we were really intentional about it, is sharing your lived experience. I think as part of the mentor, as part of the intentionality, is sharing our lived experience, our career development, but beyond that, just how we navigate this space. I think oftentimes we can give advice and give instructions, but sometimes it's easier if you hear how we've done it ourselves and how we've navigated and so forth. So that is one of the things that I know that Jamila does, that I definitely do, and that I definitely, you can see it from Gloria and Valerie, that we incorporate into our mentorship and how we share information, because I think it has an impact for definitely other Black women coming up.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next question. So what do you all do for self-care? Like, what are some of the things that you all do to take care of yourselves, especially considering all the things that are, you have to manage on a day-to-day, but then also all the things that are going on in the world and in the country? What do you all do for self-care?
I'll jump into this one. So, because I was thinking about this, and it's been something that I actually have been trying to be intentional about. I think particularly as Black, Jamila said it earlier, I think even Valerie touched on it, as Black women in leadership, we wear many hats. So we're not just a director or a CEO or a VP or what have you. We're oftentimes a mother, a wife, a sister, a daughter, you name them. Could be a community leader. You might be on the usher board at church. There's a number of things hats that we wear, and that comes with a lot of responsibilities. And I think that sometimes, back to that stereotype, that we feel like we've got to not only be non-emotional, but you got to be strong, and you got to do it all, and you got to carry everybody's load. And so, I think that there's this, I've seen this shift in particularly Black women trying to focus on self-care, trying to take care of ourselves. And I think we've learned from maybe other generations of not doing that. And so to me, self-care can be many things. It can be a massage, it could be reading a book, it could be exercise, time with friends, and so forth. And those are things that I do. But what I am now also realizing, and I'm a health service researcher, so I should have realized this earlier, is that it also means keeping up with your health care, your screenings, your appointments, things of that nature. And I think sometimes we don't. I can admit that I have let some of that slip. And so that is a big thing that I think that we need to know, particularly as someone who does health service research and knows the disparities in health outcomes, that is extremely important for us as part of our health, our self-care. And then lastly, I just want to share, it's the asking for help. As Black women, and particularly as Black women leaders, you are oftentimes the problem solver. You're the one who makes the decisions. And so you get into that role and don't realize that, you need to ask for help. You cannot do it all. And when you do, it lightens your load. And sometimes people know things better than you, particularly if it's, might be your doctor, could be your plumber, could be anything. And so I haven't figured it out. I'm not getting an A on it. But I will say those are the things that I think it's, finding that time alone, and then taking care of your health, and then also asking for help.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'll jump in here. I appreciate Robin making the point about taking care of your health. I personally am like working down my checklist of I got to get all of these things, appointments and things in before the summer is out. Because yeah, I'm behind on some things that you spend so much time doing and taking care of others. But related to that, I think you have to like give yourself permission sometimes to be selfish. Like we take that as like a bad thing, but to really do self-care, you do have to decide, I'm not worrying about any of that other stuff right now. This is about me. This is what I want to do. This is what I need to do sometimes. So we were talking about laughter earlier. I love a good laugh too. So like for me, it can be like getting on the phone with my sister and just being like silly and just cracking up about stuff is really helpful. I also think that in terms of like taking care of yourself related to work stuff, there's times when it's good to be able to get with people and talk to people who can relate, who have that experience, and just like sharing those stories that with somebody that you know is going to give you a head nod and say, yeah, I know what you're talking about there. But then also being able to take the time to step back and just disconnect from that. And this goes back to me and my sister and spending time with people for whom like the title doctor means absolutely nothing to them. People who know you from way back and just kind of know you as an individual outside of that professional space. And then I like spending time outside. Like for me, my happy place is like out in my backyard. So just again, connecting with things that, gave me joy as a little girl that I enjoyed doing and, giving myself permission to do those things even now.
Yeah, I'll just briefly add to this. I think, one is playing with my puppy. Everybody in the office knows I have a little puppy Leo that brings me joy that I like to play with. Actually, got him when my son went off to college, and so he's my little companion. And then also too, I love cycling, particularly on the Peloton. I also love running and yoga, and those things really help me decompress. But I also want to say too, like doing nothing is also rest is revolution. And I think honoring that, I mean, I can even share a quick story. We were doing chair massages in our office yesterday for staff, and I went in for mine. And of course I walk in and I'm like, hi, I'm the CEO of IWPR. Thank you all for being here. And during my chair massage, the gentleman, he said to me, he said, I need you to embrace not doing anything right now. And I was like, I don't even know how to do that. I'm at work, but we have these massages. And he kept telling me, embrace not doing anything, embrace doing nothing in this moment. And, kind of had to coach me through that. And then I, proceeded to let go and honor, that moment of rest that I was having in the workplace. So just wanted to put that out there too. I think even in those moments where, we have our personal time and we're supposed to be decompressing, there's still things that we're filling into that free space. And it is okay if you do nothing, if you just, have a quiet afternoon, with your coffee, doing nothing. And so just wanted to offer that as well.
Okay. This is probably the last question we'll take. So if you wanted to throw anything in there, Gloria, but no pressure. It's up to you.
I would just add that I certainly co-sign what everyone has added, okay, except for the yoga and the Peloton. But definitely, I feel like I'm getting better at self-care because I've gotten better at setting boundaries, which I think is really critical for self-care. And one of the primary things has really been learning to say no more often, because I think as leaders, we feel like we have to say yes to all the things. And, as you mentioned, Valerie, we have to prioritize our health. And that means also that you can't say yes to everything, all the time. So definitely co-signing, taking time off, rest to have fun, doing absolutely nothing, and not feeling guilty about it. I think that's really important because I know for many of us, it's really tough to sort of shut off your brain. Even when you're doing something that really should be calming and relaxing, those thoughts continuously, are jumping in, and shutting off and training yourself to really decompress is something that I think we often really struggle with, but you really have to prioritize self-care. We really do, because the impact of not prioritizing it can be devastating. Stress and the burnout are things that we just don't want to continue to perpetuate.
Yeah, well, that's it for our Q&A. So Jamila, did you want to close us out? Thank you all.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first off, I mean, again, thank you all so much for being here and for being a part of this amazing event. I certainly feel so encouraged by this conversation today, and inspired and hopeful, about the future with you all leading the charge, and taking care of business in your organizations and for our field. I also want to thank the IWPR staff for your work on this event. Thank you, Jennifer. Amazing presentation to get us started. And we hope that you all will join IWPR for additional events and webinars like this. I do want to take a step back and plug our Power Plus Summit, which is IWPR's flagship event taking place in Chicago, Illinois, September 23rd and 24th of this year. You can go to PowerPlus2024.com to find more information and to register for the event. And then also, if you're not already following IWPR on our social channels, please connect with us on X, Facebook, IG, and more. And so I'll pass it back over to Jennifer.
Thank you. And in addition to plugging Power Plus, I'm going to again just share the QR code for the fact sheet that I mentioned at the beginning of the call, that gives more information about Black Women's Equal Pay Day, as well as the pay disparities Black women face, and then those policy solutions that we recommend as well. And so if you haven't had a chance to scan the QR code, please do that now if you would like to. And then also just keep an eye out for a follow-up email regarding this event, as well as a recording. We're going to send out a recording to all of our registered participants. And I would like to thank everyone for participating today, especially our panelists and Dr. Taylor for moderating the panel. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you.